Pressure, where my guest today is Garry Ridge. I'll tell you all about Garry in just a moment. Grace Under Pressure is that show that deals with the soft stuff, the caring, the commitment we exert for others. And when you do it from a leadership position, as you'll definitely discover Garry is, and has been for decades, you do it to bring people together for common cause. Garry Ridge, welcome to Grace Under Pressure.
G'day, John. I love your intro music. It reminds me of one of my favorite places, as you know, which is Hawaii. It has that little Hawaii sound. But Grace Under Pressure, live from London today, by the way.
Well, thank you. I want to tell folks all about you. You are former chairman emeritus and CEO of WD-40 for 25 years. You're also an adjunct professor at the University of San Diego, where you teach principles and practices of corporate culture. And the reason you're here today, other than being my friend, is you have a brand new national best-selling book called Any Dumbass Can Do It. So Garry Ridge, welcome to Grace Under Pressure.
Thank you, John. Always delightful to be with you, my friend.
Thank you. Now, culture is a big topic in every organization. We all talk about it, and I've heard stories of executives getting briefed on culture, and they slam the table and go, "Let's have one." So why is it so hard to? It's already inherently there, but how is it so hard to create a positive culture? Tell us about that.
Well, John, I think the real thing is it's not fairy dust. A lot of people think you can take that one training course or do that one leadership course, sprinkle fairy dust on the organization, and culture happens. It doesn't happen that way at all. And I tell a story in the book. I remember when I was a young lad back in Australia in high school in my science class, my science teacher said, we're going to grow some culture. And they gave us a petri dish and they said, here's the two most important things. Firstly is the ingredients you put in the petri dish, and secondly, how you take care of it. And it takes time to grow the culture. And as the owner of the petri dish, or as the leader, you've got to be not only caring, but brave enough to feed the good ingredients and attack the toxins. I have a really good friend. I think you know him. His name's Charlie Malouf. He owns a number of Ashley furniture stores out in the Charlotte area. And he has a beautiful saying. He says, culture is not a microwavable event. It takes a crock pot approach. So simple answer, it takes time and commitment.
Great. And so that gets to my next question. So when we have well-intentioned executives, not the dumbasses per se, what's the first obstacle? And they want to build a caring culture. What's the first obstacle they encounter, and what advice do you have?
Well, I think there's two angles to that. And I hope they are dumbasses, because dumbassery is your superpower. And I am the dean of dumbassery. I'll have you know that. But I think there's two things. Number one is if they're looking at it as getting an immediate return on investment, it doesn't happen. This thing takes time. So I think that's really, really important that they think about that. The other one is, are they sincere about really having the commitment that it's not about just them, it's about the people they have the privilege to lead. So I think that's the other side, is a lot of people give it sort of word service, but they're not really committed to the fact that this is hard work. It's simple, it's not easy, John, and time is not your friend.
Right. Let me dig in there. When you say it's hard work, what does that mean per se? Is it harder than digging ditches?
Well, it's hard work because you're dealing with the most complex thing in the world, people. So, you have to be intentional. To build a great culture, there are a couple of things that have to be in place with people. Number one, do people in the organization know, and are they treated like they belong? And number two, do the people in the organization know and treated like they matter? Now, that's two simple statements. But that's really, really focused and dedicated work, because it takes that interaction with people to do that.
Right. Now, when you were at WD-40 for many years and you were CEO for 25 years, you turned the culture around or nurtured it and grew it. And quote, I'll use a title that you made a difference, is that you don't use the word manager, you use the word coaches. What's the backstory on that, Garry?
Well, let me give you an example. John, you've just come to work at WD-40 Company. It's your first day. I welcome you and say, good day, John. Welcome to WD-40. I'm going to manage you. How does that feel?
A little bit. I know who my boss is.
So what about if I say to you, John, my role here as a coach, I'm dedicated to helping you win your game. I know what it takes to win. I'm going to be on the sideline watching you as much as I can. When I'm never going to run onto the field and steal the ball from you, but I'm going to help you make that best kick. I'm never going to go to the podium and steal the prize from you, but I'm going to make sure you're put on the podium and you're recognized for the great stuff you do. And John, you and I are going to spend a lot of time in the stinky locker room, because that's where we build trust, and that's where we build that psychological safety. So you manage your bank account and you manage inventory. Our job as leaders is to help those we have the privilege to lead play their best game. And as you know, John, I wrote an earlier book with my dear friend, Dr. Ken Blanchard, and it was the title of the book was Helping People Win at Work. But the byline was, I'm not here to mark your paper, I'm here to help you get an A. And a coach's job is not to mark people's papers, it's to help them get an A. Because if you're doing that, you're showing people they matter.
I know that story about Dr. Blanchard because he has told it about when he was at Cornell, I think, and he said, and I think faculty got a little upset because he said, "Well, I want my students all to get A's," a good thought, but it is the helping thing, and it's so obvious and so important, but we just kind of overlook it. So. There's a fear factor then. If I'm, quote, too nice to somebody, I'm letting them slide. Do you encounter that, Garry?
Well, leadership is a balance between being tough-minded and tender-hearted. And, building great cultures is not, margarita parties, popcorn, and ping pong tables. You have to have a heart of gold and a backbone of steel. But, redirecting people doesn't mean you have to be ugly to them. I mean, if you truly are doing it to help them step into the best version of their personal self, you do it with care. And you don't do and doing it with care shows that you're there to help them be their best self.
Empathy is critical to a caring culture. Do you believe we can learn to develop it? And if so, how?
Yeah, empathy is really important. I often say that toxic leaders, their ego eats their empathy instead of their empathy eating their ego. And empathy is different to sympathy. Empathy is about getting alongside someone and feeling and understanding their situation they're in. I love the story, John. You're on a cruise ship. You and I are on a cruise ship. We're out in the middle of the ocean. You're down by the rail and you're throwing up and you're not feeling well. I come along and put my arm around you and say, John, I'm sorry you're not feeling well. That's sympathy. I start throwing up with you. That's empathy.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, you feel it. That's true. Now, toward that, and empathy is, but it's, I guess that's part of what we would call the soft stuff, and so we shy around it because you said I loved your description of leadership: heart of gold and a spine of backbone of steel. So might there be that tendency to say, well, I mean, it's okay, but I don't want to be perceived as too soft. What do you say? What do you say to that, Garry?
John, you and I have a dear friend, John Carusi. He wrote a wonderful book, I'm sure you've read it, which is called To Be Honest. He has a wonderful saying: leaders sometimes protect their own comfort zone at the expense of other people's development. Now, remember, I said this is simple, not easy. So a true leader, if there is a true contract, a true understanding of expectations between the coach and the person they're coaching, redirection is not ugly. It becomes easy because what you're doing is helping them win the play. So again, it comes back to, if you are a leader who doesn't set expectations, where accountability isn't clear, where you haven't got a clear set of values to help drive behaviors, then those conversations become really, really, really uncomfortable, and you will protect your own comfort zone at the expense of someone else's development.
Right. Well, toward that, we need an attribute that you discuss, and that's courage. You know, we laud the examples of courage in our culture, our history, but in our own lives, when things get sticky, as they be, we kind of back off that. As Ron's quote indicates, you know, it's more, I want to stay in my own comfort zone. So, what about courage? How can we exert it? So,
Well, courage again comes back to the role of a leader. And, you know, any leader in any situation that is really taking care of their people is displaying courage. They're going first, they're leading the way, they're going into the unknown. So, you know, you have to have a little bit of courage to be able to be truly a beneficial leader to the people. You know, it's remember, leadership is about people following you. So courage means going first.
very aptly put, but it's too often sort of forgotten. Toward that same thing, maybe the courage attribute is that you. I love this turn of phrase you have. You tell new managers that telling someone they're doing just fine is not fine. So, uh, why is that so bad? So,
Well, we're not here to just do just fine. We're here to do what we need to do, which is to continually improve. So, you know, that's just fine is the status quo. And, you know, if you're not learning and you're not improving, you're not growing. So, as you know, it's so important that we are continual. I love the quote from Michelangelo, I think it was. You see it on my email, in coro, imparo in coro, which means learning I still am. And I think that's really important that we have a learning environment.
you know, toward that, I remember working in an organization once, and they said that everybody here is really nice. And I said, well, that's not a bad thing. And I go, well, yeah, it is a bad thing because no one tells the truth per se. So, you know, it becomes the disease of nice where we just let things slide. Is Have you seen that kind of thing, Gary? So,
You know, I push back on that a little bit, John. I don't think that, you know, being nice is the reverse of actually being fair. And, you know, I often say that in organizations where you're candid, I talk about candid conversations. And candid conversations is no lying, no faking, no hiding. I believe in most organizations, people don't lie. I believe they fake and hide. Why do they fake and hide? Because of fear. And that's why, you know, we took the word failure out of our vocabulary. We said we don't make mistakes, we have learning moments. And that was an amazingly strong position to take because we were then free to talk about what worked and why and share that with our folks everywhere. And we were free and applauded and rewarded for talking about what didn't work and why and sharing it with our people.
well, that gets to the fundamentals, I think, that you have been teaching and practicing for so long. And I don't know a CEO who uses the word learning and practices it as much as you and the culture you helped instill at WD-40. Learning is, when you're at the top, is learning harder? I mean, in a sense.
Well, you can make it harder because what happens with a lot of toxic leaders, and you know, you've met my friend Alec. He's in the book, the soul sucking CEO, or it could be Alice. And you know, that toxic leader thinks they have all the answers, and in fact, they do, even the wrong ones.
Yeah.
And if you then don't have that atmosphere of learning, how are you going to unleash the wealth of knowledge that's sitting in the room with you? You know, that's why I called the book "Any Dumbass Can Do It," because I truly believe dumbassery is a superpower, because it allows you to unlock the potential of everybody around you, and I think that's so important.
Right. Well, here's the thing, and you know, when it's always good to talk these things in a calm environment, and things are rolling along. But when there's a high stress environment and things seem to be falling apart or whatever, the high stress and stuff. So being open to new suggestions and things is what we should do, but our psyche pushes back at that. What would you say to that, Garry? So
It's time out. You know, I love, I think there was a big learning moment during COVID, and I've said this a few times. In times of high stress, do not make finite decisions. And in the book, I talk about one of the great fighter pilots, Nicole Milankovsky, and she talks about she was a pilot with I think they're called the Blue Angels, you know, those planes that fly at 600 miles an hour within a foot of each other.
yeah.
And in the book, I talk about flying loose, which basically is when they're in that formation and they hit turbulence, the worst thing you can do is take control of the joystick and jerk like this. She says it makes for a very ugly flight show. So at that time, you have to loosen up and fly loose and make sure that you're taking in what's going on around you. So in times of great stress, don't make finite decisions. That's when you really have to think it through.
Okay. I just posted something today with that theme about in times of stress, it's okay to yell and shout. Just don't act on it. So,
Yeah, right.
And take that time out, as you
exactly.
said. And that's maybe counterintuitive to fight or flight, but it's important to do it. And I think you have to, and here's something that I've noticed, and I know you exemplify it, it's modeling that behavior. Because that sends, what do you, when you would speak to new managers or heart-to-heart kinds of things, how did you help them discover that, to reveal, to ease off, if you were, or to let yourself go a bit? What was your perspective on that, Garry? So.
Well, you're right. You have to model it. If they see you, I can't say they would see me with my hair on fire for obvious reasons, because there is a lot of hair to get on fire. But if they see you react in a panic mode, do they feel secure? No. Have you ever felt secure in a situation where someone was panicking? No, it doesn't happen. So you have to control yourself and be deliberate in what you do. Take a time of solace, as our dear friend Marshall Goldsmith would say. Let it go.
Let it go. Toward that end is, and you preach this and teach it, and it's in the book, the virtue of simplicity. I think we as human beings, or particularly in management, we're great at adding complexity. Why do we do that instead of keeping it simple?
Well, we try to camouflage issues with confusion to make it how smart we are. And I tell a story in the book about early in my career when I just moved to the United States. I was in a meeting at WD-40 company, and there was a person coming and presenting to us from a consulting firm. And we're about 10 minutes into the meeting, and I'm sitting there going, I have no clue what you're talking about. I am not getting any value out of this at all. They were camouflaging the issue with confusion to make it how smart they are. So I put up my hand and I said, I'm sorry, not long in this country, but you're going to have to help me, because I have no clue what you're talking about. John, everybody in the room went, ah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's similar to Alan Mulally tells a story when he first came to Ford, and they were in very challenging circumstances, and they had their group meetings, and then Alan, the business plan review, and everything was green. He had the green, red, yellow, green. I'm sorry, green, yellow, red, and everything was all green. And he said, we went around the room. He said, folks, we just lost $25 billion. How is everything okay? And one person raised his hand and said, yeah. So
that was
and
Mark
I think
Fields. That was Mark Fields.
It was. And so, and how do we, I'm glad you did that as a quote, young person new to the country, but I think, how do you encourage people to speak up if, in that? And that's part of the culture, I think, right?
Yeah, it's safety. I mean, that's the locker room thing. Are you creating safety?
One of the good things of your book, Any Dumbass Can Do It. It's packed with stories. It's good research and stuff. But I love this little stuff in here: best, worst, and first. Advice section in every chapter. why did you lead with the worst or include the worst? I see best and first, but why the worst? So,
Well, in my coaching practice, the first thing I do is help people to become aware of their behavior. And the worst is there because a lot of people are probably practicing worst now and they haven't really realized it. So I thought it was worth highlighting it. And I got to thank my co-writer Martha Finney who came up with that best worst first. And she's just been magnificent. She took my learning moments of life and she weaved them into this tapestry of the book, which is so beautiful. So she gets a lot of credit for helping us put this together.
no, she's an excellent writer, and fortunate to have her as a collaborator. So
Absolutely.
now, when things are going well, there's a tendency, I suppose, just because we're human beings, just guessing. Let's just stay where we are. Why is that unsustainable, Garry? So,
Well, because you need to continually create an environment that has the opportunity to reward people, and to do that, you need to be growing. Stagnation. What happens when water is stagnant, John? What it goes sour and yucky stuff grows in it. So you don't want to be a stagnant pond. You want to be that river that's flowing from the mountains to the sea, which is creating life and fun along the way.
okay. Now, what was I'm going to dig back again. When as the culture was at WD-40, when the culture was taking hold, what was the biggest obstacle? What was the pushback that you heard? So,
Oh, um, if we ignore him, this will go away. He's drunk too much of Ken Blanchard's go-go juice or Kool-Aid.
yeah.
Again, it was that first thing we talked about when we opened this conversation, John, is this is about consistency. And some people didn't want to be in a culture where they were actually held accountable as well as being recognized. So, it takes time, but it works.
Right. And I think that's important to know that if you're building this culture and a nurturing culture, caring culture, a learning moment culture, it's not a switch. And so when you encountered resistance like that, how did you deal with it? One-on-one or group to group, or what was the methodology, Garry? So,
It was just restating what our purpose was and why it was important. And that, and going back to, one of my favorite quotes from Aristotle, pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work. And I would say to someone, do you truly think that if people don't enjoy being here, they are doing their best work? And the simple answer to that is no, they're not doing their best work. So isn't our
right.
role to do best work? And John, I'm committed to this now, in that I believe business has an opportunity and a responsibility to make a difference in the world. And they will do that if they build cultures where people go to work every day, they make a contribution to something bigger than themselves. They learn something new, they're protected and set free by a compelling set of values, and they go home happy. Because happy people build happy families build happy communities build happy countries, and happy countries build a happy world. And I don't think anybody would argue with me right now. A little happier world would be okay.
You got that, brother. So true. And that gets to you address it in the book, the ripple effect. What you create in your culture and your team and your organization and can spread outside of that. So, and what effects did you have at your own firm? Did you see more engagement in volunteer activities and communities, or what was your perspective on that, Garry? So,
Well, we had a 93% employee engagement. And the thing that's sad, I've seen people leave organizations because they hate working where they are. And I'll tell you, they're not very happy at home either. So our job is to fix that.
great. So now, I think, as you know, you've been a guest on my show before. I ask every guest a story about grace. Do you have one that you'd like to share with us, Garry? So,
Yeah, thank you for the question, John. Grace showed up in my life when I stopped trying to be the person with all the answers and started being a learner. I let go of the need to mark people's papers and to choose I chose instead to help them get an A. That's grace in action, leading not through control, but through curiosity, empathy, and love. Some of my greatest lessons came from mistakes rather than shame. I chose to call them learning moments. Grace taught me to trade ego for humility and blame for forgiveness. When I stepped down as CEO of WD-40 Company, Grace was again present. It wasn't about giving up power. It was about passing it on with purpose. I embraced my role as chairman emeritus and teacher, continuing to serve by sharing what I have learned. Grace isn't loud, it's quiet strength to lift others, the courage to admit when you're wrong, and the joy of helping people become who they're meant to be. That's the story I try to live.
Wow, that's a powerful, powerful poem, I will say, my friend, about the power of grace. And I'm glad you hit two things. We think of grace as it's given to us and we share with others, but I'm glad how you turned it inward too, because it's too often overlooked that I need to show myself grace. And so that's a key point. So, anyway.
Thank you.
So I know you're on this global tour for Any Dumbass Can Do It. So how can people, where's the book? I think everywhere.
Yeah.
It's a national bestseller.
So. It is a national bestseller. A couple of things I'd love to share, John. If people want to go to my website, www.thelearningmoment.net, at the top banner, there's a little tag and you can take a quiz. It's the Dumbass Quiz. And when you take the quiz, you'll get your powerful dumbass rating. And then I'll actually send you a playbook to give you a head start on how you can start building a great culture in your company. So do that. So go to the website and do the quiz, and I'll send you a playbook to get you started.
That's powerful, and I like that. And that's an act of grace, my friend, because you're not asking anything in return. Okay.
No, I'm not.
Answer some questions and be honest with yourself, and you'll get some. Gary, we could go on for another hour or so, but I know you are a busy person, and we need to keep moving. So, with that, my friend, we will end, and all the best. So,
thanks, John. Good to be with you.